Okay, so next we have an industry case study. Essentially, I thought this was a really neat project to include because it's, I think, a new way of looking at long-term conservation strategy. And I was fortunate to get NiSource to share kind of their experience. So we have Brian Cordham from NiSource, who was previously in the role of integrated vegetation management strategy at Columbus Gas Distribution Company that operated rights-of-way in 6 states. But he's recently transitioned into the environmental department where he manages natural resources permitting and is responsible for driving environmental compliance and ecological stewardship. He has his bachelor's degree in forestry from Southern Illinois University and an MBA from Indiana Wesleyan. He's joined by Stan Vera-Art, who spoke at our Science Roundtable yesterday. Stan is originally from the Netherlands. He currently resides in a cabin in the woods in Cherokee County, Oklahoma, where he writes poetry while trying to tame wild chipmunks. He has a passion for anything tree-related and has terrible luck remembering any facts he's ever learned. In his free time, he can be found pondering right-of-way vegetation management challenges and solutions. So welcome, the two of them.
It's nice not to be under a 5-minute time constraint this time. Out of the many conferences I attended over the years, I have yet to find one where there is such a bubbly, lively, open atmosphere as this one. And I'm thankful for the webinars that people can listen in, but I truly hope that they are able to and will join and experience what's the atmosphere that we have here. Because in my experience, it's pretty unique. Maybe you experience this everywhere you go. All the conferences you attend, and I just attend the wrong ones. Could be. And then the setting as well. This setting brings back memories from when I attended a university, walking down these halls, just entering this building. And I think back to the ideology that I had back then, and if they're still in alignment of what I am doing today. I do wish I was in school today, because just the floor below us there is a plastic wrap bubble stress relief room. They must be right before exams here. You do have to sign up, and there is a waiting list. But it's available and it's here. Goodness. I kind of wish I chose another picture. I kind of wish I chose the monarch butterflies hanging out in the trees in Mexico. I mean, we're concentrating on milkweed, but what would they do without those trees in Mexico, right? Does anybody know what kind of tree this is? I tried to look them up. The baobab? What amazes me about this organism is the fairly little amount of photosynthesis compared to the entire body that they're trying to keep alive. And when I was in Africa and I walked up to a baobab tree, I had a car key in my pocket. It wasn't one of those modern ones where you can just press buttons. It was actually where you had a metal thing sticking out, one of those old car keys. And you can walk up to the trunk and you can just push it in there and it will just bounce back. It's amazing. I think these are in Madagascar, but I could be wrong. All right, I better stick to my script, otherwise my slides won't line up. My script says, I often find myself wondering why so many young people divorce these days. When I wrote down this sentence, I had to read it twice myself because I thought we're talking about pollinator corridors. I often find myself wondering why so many young people divorce these days. And then I realized, well, it's true. I do often think about that, And I think it has something to do with the fact that it appears to be that early on in biology, early on in nature, opposite seems to attract. When we look at atoms or we look at electrons, it appears to be that opposites attract. And I don't know if anybody of you, and please tell me if you have, but have you ever had the pleasure to witness a young married couple? Let me bring them into the picture. She, an architect who does bookkeeping and accounting on the side as a hobby. You know, he's a modern artist and a poet and a philosopher. Have you ever had the pleasure of witnessing them decorate their first house together? You know, or depending on your generation, maybe this brings it closer to home. It's kind of a miracle they bought a house to begin with, right? I can't seem to believe that maybe the price was right in the art district. But at times, working with vegetation in right-of-ways, I feel the same is true. I feel like at times, at the surface, there seems to be a tremendous amount of conflict that we run into. Because just when you feel like I'm making headway, the maintenance department comes in, system hardening, tear down all of your vegetation, cost compaction, set the stage for inviting weeds and invasive back in. Or just when you get to a point where you feel like I'm making progress and I'm making headway, somebody lists a new endangered species or threatens to list one, or there's a road widening project or a new pipeline going in. And I think about it long enough, I think it's at the surface. But when either one of this couple is heading for a divorce, they first go and see a counselor, right? That's what you usually do when you're thinking in those directions, and you go and see a counselor. And a counselor comes in and they usually start distracting you with Maslow or Freud, Jung, or other complex minds. But if it's a good counselor, what he or she is trying to do is trying to search for the common goals in your marriage, in your long-term marriage approach. And is trying to bring the common goals back to the surface. And turns out that very often they're both in it for the long run, and they're both looking for stability or a certain amount of safety, or a secure place to live. And underneath it all, there seems to be a lot of similarity and common goals that you can then bring to the surface. Now, any of the companies that you work for probably are not likely to bring in a counselor. What I often see them do is they bring in a consultant. Why? It's beyond me. But they bring in consultants. And then very often these days, a consultant comes in with a toolkit and throws out project management principles, or portfolio management, or program management, or adaptive management. Perhaps even a consultant will throw holistic management strategies at you, and holistic management is pretty much basically a proactive adaptive management. Adaptive management is more based on the earlier societies that we formed as humanity. But then pretty soon, this consultant is going to run into something that I have come to term the Silophilia virus. I had to look it up too. But the Silophilia virus, boy, do we feel comfortable in our silos. It took me 7 years to break out of my silo and actually sign up. Having run into Iris, who was cross-pollinating industries, and gave a panel discussion presentation on a silo that I have gotten very familiar with the vegetation management or the forestry department in utilities. But we're very comfortable in our silos. They give us protection. And, you know, we got the maintenance department. And this is so great about this group. At times I felt like I prepared the wrong presentation for the right people because we have so many different silos in this room. But in the previous presentation, you know, it was one of the lessons learned is let's break out of those silos. But you have the maintenance, the environmental department, you know, where most of us are active in. You have the forestry or the vegetation management silo. And then, of course, you have your capital projects. Right? But there's an entirely different set of humor, too. Like in that forestry department, I found myself on stage up in Halifax a couple of years ago, and Brian was there to witness it. And I said, people, we are a species that have the capacity of rational thought, and we create linear landscapes. And we depend on our survival on an idea that we invented called money that we now depend on for survival, and no other creature in nature is mimicking that or doing that, and we're trying to apply rational thought and linear lines and monetary system to a non-linear environment. And I said, that's kind of insanity. Yeah, you maybe have the same kind of sense of humor than that forestry silo. But it's in the silo. So over 25 years ago, Jack Welch championed to say, okay, we have to break through these boundaries, break through, become transparent, become a boundary-less society. And he made great headway. And the theory became known as General Electric workout process. And it centered around the boundary-less organizations. And then I got discouraged again about 2 years ago when Harvard published a publication that despite all of our modern communication tools and techniques and our Twitters and tweets and cell phones, we still have these silos very vividly alive within our companies. And so what I think we have to do, and it's not just a consultant's burden, but I think what we have to do is find relieving strategies for the Silophilic atrophy. And I think we have to become boundaryless and transparent. And becoming transparent or showing or communicating what it is that you want to do is scary. I feel far more comfortable with the presentation this morning at DOT where we said, well, I just set out and do it and then ask for permission later. That's me, you know. But it might not always be in the best interest of a boundaryless organization. So become transparent and branch out to a boundaryless organization. So, so looking ahead, 30-year sustainable right-of-way care, the actual title of this presentation, making headway. I think that if we truly look at the underlying aim that we're all working towards too, I think we can find many common goals that are not in conflict. I think that every single department has benefits and can see the benefits from a low-growing, low in succession, low in maintenance, and fairly stable plant community on right-of-ways. If you have to meet FERC or NERC regulations, if it needs to be the safe power supply, if you want to establish pollinator corridors, if you want to be beneficial to the monarchs, underneath it all, there's one common goal, and if we bring that vision upwards out from our silos and communicate it to our bosses' bosses and make it part of that vision statement addressed earlier, I think we can create that boundaryless company environment. So we were brainstorming about this, and Perhaps a way to do this is, yes, we have sustainability plans and we have all these policies and we have all these project plans, but what if we bring it company-wide, a long-term vision, and help the vegetation and the forestry department silo move away from their 3 and 5 and 6 year cycles that they're on, that they have to stay on to meet compliance. He said, you don't understand, lawyers are breathing down my neck, you don't understand, we have to stay in compliance if these lights don't stay on, etc., etc. If we bring the conversation to this is where we're trying to get to in 30 years from now, and if we want to revert that slide from the Pheasants Forever this morning, where in 40 years we saw the decline of that monarch, that's 40 years ago. If we look ahead 30 years and communicate a 30-year vision, and then align all of the activities in every silo in alignment with 30 years that we're looking down the line, I think it's easier to get approval of a seed mix that might be 12 times more expensive. Not if you take the net present value or the long run in consideration. I think if we can get alignment of all of the contractors and the subcontractors that are active in this industry and tie in with a 30-year vegetation vision, you can actually do something with the soil food web and the soil life. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in 3-year cycles. I think if we truly have a long-term vision with the suitability analysis that Cardno presented yesterday, or at least something similar to it, we can align all of our activities on the right-of-ways with that vision in mind and that common goal. So some items I want to throw at you that could be part of the boundaryless right-of-way operational plan is proper IVM practices. So many times do I hear, yes, we do IVM. Well, what do? Well, we mow and we spray and we mow and we spray and we spray some more and then we mow and then we spray. And I'm sure most of you have heard the definition of insanity over and again. But there is more to IVM with the biological and the cultural methods that come truly and blossom if you take a 30-year vision ahead of you. That's truly when you can capitalize on having nature work with you and not against you. That's truly when you can capitalize on encouraging the desirables that you do want and not continue to fight the vegetation that you don't want. So proper IVM practices, branch out. Agroecology, a fast-growing profession. Agroecology, you can actually search for break-even points on your right-of-way. Why does it always have to cost money? Why can it make money? A recent feasibility study of the Savory Institute on 53 acres of grazing under power lines showed that in 6 years you can have a return on investment plus enhance your soil life and your vegetation. You can even chip the cows in case they break out. You can even have apps where you inform landowners a week ahead of time that the cows are going to appear on their land and they can see exactly where they are. You can make it safe. Why not search for economical values for ecological enhancements and create seed banks? And there are conversations with, for example, Cardno and if your lines are close enough to their seed harvesting areas, it's feasible for them. Look for those break-even points. You know, invite agroecology. I would love to throw in permaculture, but then eyebrows are going to be even higher raised, like, well, we want to not involve that, but that's where you have that edge community. That's where you have permanent culture. And that's where you can incorporate the 30-year vision. Safe harbor agreements, of course. Wildlife Habitat Council certification, of course. The native habitat improvements. Make them part of your 30-year vision and line up all of your contractors that they know what vision they are working towards to. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. Should I just fast forward on this? Common metrics and sustainable right-of-way acreage. What a vision Stan has or a dream. What if we have meetings up here where we have all of the companies that have right-of-ways that they manage and they commit publicly, strange word, close enough, right? There's a letter missing in there somewhere. Yeah, dyslexic. So what if we have a list of companies here and they commit openly to all of us, we're going to commit to 250 acres a year under sustainable right-of-way care, and next year we do it again, and next year we do it again, and pretty soon you have 750, 900, 1,200 acres for that company that they enroll their system, you know. And then what if you can bring those out underneath all of the silos, that it's not just the environmental side, the environmental department silo that is managing sustainably, but also the vegetation or the forestry department. And you bring that out in the open and you commit to that. Definitely you'll have additional training that is needed or communication. And then of course you can put in your boundaryless right-of-way operational plan, your pollinator corridors. We'll look at that real quick because we have pretty much covered all of that. Describe in your plan, you know, what are your best management practices when you work with bare soil? How do you establish pollinator corridors? How do you go about it? What are your conversion practices when you begin with existing soil? You know, have those conversations. If they don't exist, create them internally in your organization. The measurement of success. When is a pollinator corridor a pollinator corridor? I was extremely pleased to hear that Rick Johnstone and IVM Partners is creating that index, the pollinator. What was the word that you used? The pollinator value index, and there's something else in there. Thank you. You know, it's a great step forward. But why does it have to be developed outside? Why can we not have a company and say, hey, when do we consider a pollinator corridor a pollinator corridor? If it can feed and sustain the rusty patch bumblebee, you got a pretty broad spectrum right there, April all the way through September. Where are you going to create them? You know, sustainability analysis and all the different data and the possibilities that you have available these days to create that. How many acres? Commit to those acres openly and communicate them. And then maybe we can run a tally, like these industries together in the next 6 years are aiming to restore or put in sustainable right-of-way care X amount of acres. You know, and then we can work towards that mission that we create. What will your public outreach be? You know, what would you like the public to say about your company in 5 to 10 years? How are you going to communicate this across silos? And this, I think, is where, again, my metaphors with trees comes in, you know, grow with trees. Kind of a quick side note, I think it's really smart to partner with trees. I know we're fighting against them on right-of-ways, but they have been around for, I think, longer than humanity has. I wasn't here to prove that, but I think that's the case. And if we partner with an organism that has found out a survival strategy on this planet, like trees, and we kind of interact in a mutual beneficial relationship, it might benefit us. I'm not sure, but how we can communicate this across silos, I think, is where Buddha found enlightenment under this tree. Not this particular one, but I think it was a similar species where it's all connected. But where we have these silos internally, but we're all part of that larger organism that Brent pointed out earlier today, you know, where the bottom line does matter, but we're all part of that. So bridge the silos, create a long-term 30-year plan, align all of the silos and the work that takes place in it, and communicate your goals. I think that's kind of what you call when somebody's on the soapbox, right? Where are we at? I think that's where you come in, Brian, and rescue the rest of this presentation. Thank you.
So this isn't the first time Stan and I have partnered on a presentation, and it's not the first time that I found myself asking at the beginning of the presentation, how is this going to transition into what I have to talk about? But you did a great job. So you can see Stan's got a lot of big ideas. We've been talking big ideas, concepts, and I'm going to bring it kind of back home on how do you implement this at a utility company. And I'm going to talk about IVM. And Josiane mentioned, you know, the cycle. This is the IVM cycle. You understand the ecosystem dynamics. You set your management goals and objectives. You look at your treatment options. You take your ecological effect and your economics into account. Implement your treatment. You monitor, and you do it again. So on an electric right-of-way or a gas right-of-way, we have particular goals. We've got, we want to keep the trees out of the electric line. We want to keep the vegetation on a pipeline low enough where if it's a ground-based inspection, they can inspect, or if it's an aerial-based inspection, that it's the right type of vegetation that would reveal a leak. What we don't necessarily take into account is the specific species composition that's out there. So for example, we've got some right-of-way over in northwest Indiana that are covered by Phragmites, right? Is Phragmites going to grow up into an electric transmission line? No. So is that meeting our tolerance level? It probably is. Well, I'll talk a little bit later about how we can take this same concept and take our conservation goals and merge IVM and move that forward. But a little more about IVM if you haven't been around, haven't heard of what IVM is. The integrated vegetation management, really it includes these 4 different methods: manual, mechanical, chemical, cultural, and biological. These are your typical manual or mechanical options, different types of mowers, some pretty beefy stuff that can take a tree down from the top and turn it into mulch, or you've got your basic chainsaw guy there. Chemical application, we're talking about herbicide. This picture over on the right, this is a Vera-Art application. This guy's putting out maybe 25 to 30 gallons an acre. Then you got the backpack sprayer, and what we've moved to is more of a thin vert. And if you look at the picture of these leaves, you can see there's very minimal herbicide that's being put out through those methods. Cultural, farms, other things that are planted out there, those are control methods. We still have to monitor that. We still have to look at that, make sure that our objectives are being met, because maybe a farmer stops farming and eventually things grow up, or you can see around the tower base there's some vegetation growing. Those things need to be managed as well. What hasn't been developed very much, and what Stan and I have been working on, are more of the biological controls, looking at nature, how nature works, and how we can work with nature to better manage our vegetation. It's a focus on the desirable plants over the undesirable. Correct use of the other types of methods has a huge impact on your biological controls. In the past, when we've promoted integrated vegetation management, it was also to try to encourage people, it was always to try to encourage people to use herbicide, because we could show that there was less impact to maybe animals that might be living out there, nesting birds. I had a picture in this presentation that I took out, was actually a box turtle that got mowed over, and I decided that was a little bit too graphic. But it gets a point across that mowing comes with a cost, whether it's nesting birds or animals like that that could get mowed up. And a lot of people are very resistant to using herbicides, but when you look at the minimal amount of herbicide that's being used in some cases, and our goal is always to reduce herbicide over time, as you get more of a stable habitat out there, you're going to be using less and less. And the impact of that herbicide over time is, in my opinion, better than the potential of mowing over nesting animals and other things like that. I used to think that those different control methods were in competition with one another. So always talking about you need to do this over that. But the reality is each of these methods has a place as you're managing an ecosystem to try to get it to a condition that you want. The key is using the right method at the right time in the right place, and that you want to be selective more than non-selective. Integrated vegetation management isn't, it's a thought out process. It's not just a repetitive, whether it's a mowing regime or a spraying regime. If you're just doing an activity, you're not doing integrated vegetation management. IVM goes out, evaluates what's out there, determines what the next step should be, and does that step and repeats it. When I say repeats it, repeats the process where you're setting new goals. What we haven't done is, like Stan mentioned, thought about what do we want this right of way to look like in the long term, 30 years from now. We're always thinking about the what our tolerances are and how we're going to keep our tolerances. Got ahead of myself a little bit, but so when we talk about the different control methods, here's an example of herbicide that was used that really had an impact on our biological controls. We oversprayed some sumac that were out on the right of way, and you can see underneath that we're having a lot of annual weeds that are coming back in. Or in this picture, there's a lot of dead stuff. And what we did was we impacted the soil biology, and we set back succession. And I wasn't here yesterday, but I know Stan well enough that he probably made some comments about the soil, and this is some of the things that we're learning, that if you don't do the herbicide applications right, you're going to have an impact to soil biology. When you do IVM the right way, you can create things like this. This is, I'm forgetting your name. Dave, right. So Dave mentioned IVM partners, Rick Johnstone, and I think Rick spoke here earlier. This is a project that I started with Rick 10 years ago down at Army Corps of Engineers property in Tennessee. And through IVM, we were able to get this right away to come back and look like this. And you can see, I mean, that's great pollinator habitat. This is a state rare or endangered, I think it's called the passion flower down there. And we didn't see this. Just by doing IVM the right way, these things came back. So questions that we're asking ourselves, are the right-of-way the best pollinator habitat they could be? And you see that pipeline corridor, pipeline right-of-way, yeah, we got it there, but does that happen all the time? When I first started, which I guess it was 17 years ago, which seems, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but what I've seen over the last 17 years is, as we've done IVM, we've been challenged with not just fighting incompatible plants like trees and things like that, and doing the IVM, we've gotten good habitat, but now we have this huge influx of these invasive plants that we're starting to fight now as well. So looking at how do we improve the pollinator habitat, how do we manage to specific species competition, and how do we convert right-of-way that might be tall-growing species? And this is a specific comment on our gas right-of-way. Electric right-of-way, any of the prairie plants that are out there are perfectly compatible. But as I was working in the gas industry, and specifically where they did ground-based inspections, the typical pollinator community plants that you think of, you know, that might grow 3 or 4 feet tall, those were unacceptable to our leak inspectors. They wanted to be able to walk these rights away with their leak inspection tool, and while they didn't want a park atmosphere, you know, mowed grass, they wanted to be able to see the hazards, be able to navigate reasonably easily through there. I did get some complaints about the dew on the grass making their pants wet, and I said, you know, I'm not going to be able to help you with that, but we'll do what we can, you know, to try to really get the vegetation lower. So we're looking at our current practices. We're redefining our goals for those particular rights-of-way. We want to get these low-growing, diverse native habitats, and we're looking at different ecological approaches to get us there. Let's see. So when I started doing natural gas pipeline at our distribution companies, the rights-of-way, a lot of them looked like this. And I found this when we were talking about stewardship and sustainability. I found this quote, "Making the future the cause of the present." And really, isn't that what we're talking about? We're talking about this future state. What do we want these rights-of-way to look like? What do we want pollinator habitat to look like? And if we think about this as our goal, I think we can get there. Josiane mentioned vision, and I've been on one of Josiane's vision quests, and I thought it would be worthwhile for me to read the vision that we came up with for NiSource, for our corporate conservation framework. And this really sets the tone for a lot of the efforts that we're doing. And mentioned in my bio that I used to do the vegetation management, and now I'm in the environmental department. Stan talked about silos. One of the things that I think I've got a unique opportunity to do is to bring those silos together. Working with the vegetation management groups and the environmental group, bringing the communications teams together. We haven't really accomplished a lot yet, but I'm feeling the momentum build just because we're knocking those silos down and we're getting everybody excited about the same thing. So here's our vision. I don't have it as part of my presentation. I wasn't planned, but I thought it was worth reading. So together with our neighboring communities and conservation groups, we are striving to be a leader in the preservation, protection, and restoration of critical habitats. Using innovative conservation initiatives, we are committed to maintaining our infrastructure while protecting the environment. That's doing business the NiSource way. So I think that encapsulates really what we're trying to do moving forward. And I think IVM is the right tool to do it. Thank you. Any questions? I'll answer the second part of that question. I'm a climate change denier. No, I'm just teasing. That question has come up a lot, and I haven't really considered it very much. But on the fire stuff, and I think we talked a little bit about this last night, and bringing Phragmite back into it. When Phragmite burns, it burns black smoke up into the electric conductors, and you have that potential arcing. And that's a reliability and a safety issue. And those two things sell ideas really, really well. And I think we can use that, not incorrectly, but I think we can use that as a motivation to control things like Phragmite on the right-of-way. Also thinking about climate change, I think a lot of the invasive species moving in probably have something to do with climate change. Dan, I don't know if Dan is here. Dan and I were talking last night about seed, and whenever we're working near a natural area, whether it's the DNR or a nature preserve or somebody, they're always focused on local genotype, which is, I think, important. I'm not a botanist, so I don't completely understand the value to that, but the invasive species don't seem to be playing by those rules. And I think we would rather have a particular type of plant and not really care that much about where the seed came from. And thinking about climate change, maybe, it'll allow us to go a little further out for some of our seed sources. I'm not a purist, and I think we have to be careful not to get caught in that trap of being too pure. Because if we do, it's kind of like that data hole. You get paralyzed by your desire to be so pure. And you look outside and there's not a whole lot of things that are truly pure around us. Personal opinion. So, I don't know if that answered your question or was just a long ramble.
In your example of the Phragmite burning, do you guys have a distance of when that is acceptable without burning too
I haven't, it's just kind of a concept that I'm thinking about throwing up to our reliability people, but so we haven't yet. Do you? Because I'll use it if you have one. But, yeah. Anything else? Thanks.